Hello everyone, Freemantle here. Let me start with these thoughts. Without other people, we aren't what we are. We can't see ourselves, we can't know ourselves in isolation, but only as we're reflected, validated, loved by others. It takes a village to raise a child, yes, but it takes a village even to be a child or an adult. We're not only better together, we aren't even human unless we're together. I just made all that up. I don't believe it. But intellectual liberals do. I talk about this liberal view of a person and a self in other videos, but today I want to talk about how it brings the liberal to the enormous importance he gives to community and democracy. How this view of the person gives him the communitarian principle and the democratic principle of his basic liberalism. In the part 2 video, I'm going to look at an argument that, if sound, means we have to reject both of these key liberal principles. The liberal's idea is that what answers to men's deepest need is, in a word, dependence. Not just technological dependence, as in my needing somebody to fix my toaster. It is need of other people. I need them in order to have my identity, in order to be a person and be the individual I am. I get that from other people, from being reflected in them, validated by them, loved by them. My need of them is the most profoundly human part of a person, any person. So it's only possible that together, in some sense, we all succeed in living, or that no one can succeed, according to the liberal. The word he likes to use, meaning all of us together, is community. That's his center of value in societal matters, issues, politics. Some people would tell you, work is everything, work is life, and they'd mean it. Other people would say, my family is the world to me. For the liberal, that center of value is the community. Some liberals who feel that especially strongly even call themselves communitarians. Whatever the community needs, the liberal is willing to give it. He has personal, individual interests, same as anybody else. Physical needs, desire to fall in love with somebody maybe, career pursuits and the like. But for the liberal, these stay in bounds of community. They're shaped by community. He devotes off-work time to the community chest. He's more than happy to pitch in on the community water-saving project. He falls in love with somebody who's never heard of a community event she wouldn't help organize. Community shapes his life. It comes first. He even subordinates himself and his interest to it if that's required. That's the ideal anyway. There is certainly never a conflict between himself and the community. And in his view, there's no such conflict in any right-minded person. And where the solidarity or community or its well-being or its flourishing requires something of a community member, that person should be required to contribute if he won't do it willingly. In other words, other things equal, the good of the community has higher priority than the interests of the individual. Or if we extend the idea of community and make it the same as society, then other things equal, the good of society as a whole has higher priority for the liberal than the interests of the individual. I call this the communitarian principle of basic liberalism. It means that as a member of the community or society, I'm always on the defensive, like being subject to the military draft in time of war. I can plan on going into the military unless the doctors find something wrong with me. In the liberal society, I can plan on having to do what's best for the community, what the community wants to do, best for its interests, unless it can be shown that I should be exempted. The interests of the community are probably going to be very high and wide, because there is no community over and above the individuals that make it up, and we individuals have interests that range all over the place. And with the solidarity that individuals feel for community if they're good liberals, It's no surprise that the liberal doesn't commit himself to any clear-cut separation between the community and the individual, between politics and private life, between government and society. He's deliberately vague about whether there is such a separation at all. He'll talk about the politics of man-woman relations or politically correct art, for example. He may not be urging that these be put under government control. I've never heard of a liberal advocate government regulating romantic relationships between men and women. But he wants social interaction generally to be at least shaped by the political process. He wants society to be politicized through and through. In the 1960s and 70s, when I was a young man, the most committed liberals of my generation had a saying: the personal is the political. Now, I don't think there was anything sinister in that. They were just expressing the fervency of their commitment. But look at the words they chose to express that commitment. The personal is the political, huh? Well, what's the personal? Anything that relates to the person. What's the political? Anything that relates to the government's business with the citizen. If everything that relates to the person also relates to the government's business with the citizen, what does that tell you about the scope of the government? And if society is to be thoroughly political, the individual's life, couldn't stand at any distance from politics, from government, from the force of law. The individual couldn't escape. Now, for good liberals, we don't want to escape from politics. And we don't need to, because there's a way in which we can all participate in making the decisions that are going to bind all of us. And that is, of course, the democratic political process. Now, when the liberal talks about democracy, he's not just referring to a form of government. Democracy is a way of life for him. It's political decision-making extended into areas of life near and far. The democratic process is used to mold institutions, activities, traditions, preferences, wherever it can plausibly be claimed that a vital public interest is involved. The democratic political process, rather than decision-making in private hands, should presumptively establish or maintain any feature of society. In other words, the democratic process is the preferred way to establish or maintain any feature of society, the liberal believes. I call this the democratic principle of basic liberalism. Molds the economy, of course, but beyond that, schools, hospitals, large businesses, the corporations as the liberal calls them, what he calls social policy, foreign policy, all this should be subject to democratic control. We should be a democratic society through and through. Does all this, the principle that the interests of the community or society come ahead of the individual's interests, the principle that the democratic process should establish or maintain any feature of society unless an exception can be proved, does all this sound like a totalitarian nightmare in the making? To individuals who have that inkling, or just misgivings about these liberal priorities, the liberal has an answer. He replies that community and democracy, in his sense of the word, are emergent values. That means that someone on the outside can't appreciate them until he finds himself on the inside. In the same way that you can't know what it's like to be old except by having grown old. You have to be in and melded with community or society before you can understand how right it is for human beings. It is therefore not necessary, the liberal believes, to rely exclusively on agreement in fashioning the better liberal society. Liberals have sometimes been perfectly straightforward in saying that people have to be remade for the fully liberal world. And certainly a remade person wouldn't have any reservations about the society he was remade for. Once finding himself in it, the fully liberal society, supported by the spirit of community, the common projects and common spirit that draws citizens together, he wouldn't care whether he'd been kicked in or kissed in. 3 takeaways from today's video. Number 1, the communitarian principle of basic liberalism. It says, the individual should be required to put the community first when a conflict arises between him and the community. 2. The democratic principle of basic liberalism. It says, the democratic process is to be used to establish or maintain any feature of society. Third takeaway, yes, the scope and power the liberal gives in these principles to society, government, law, regulation is a nightmare in the making. Not so warm and fuzzy if you live in a fully liberal society and you want to go your own way. By the way, communitarians used to be called and called themselves collectivists. Today they prefer to be called communitarians, maybe because the word community is warmer and fuzzier. Exactly the same idea, is just a change of name. So you might verify what I've said about them or learn more about them by searching under either the word collectivist or the word communitarian. Thank you for listening.